This will be the first time in more than 10 months that I have attempted to speak in public, but I want you to consider with me the invitation to visit the King. This is not an imaginary story, but wholly factual. I was there myself. A number of years ago, I was invited by His Majesty Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia to visit his ancient empire, to inspect the schools which were beginning to be reorganized after the long occupation during the war, and report to him in person. In company with Dr. E. Joseph Evans, one of the trustees of the college, I went to Ethiopia and made that inspection. Then came the word from the palace that as of a given day and hour, we were to present our report to His Majesty. You can be very sure that we were punctual. We arrived in plenty of time. We had been briefed by the Department of State of Ethiopia just as to how to dress and what to do. The closest thing to formal dress that I had was an Oxford gray suit, and that had to do. When our names were called, we went to the drawing room in the palace in which the emperor himself was seated at the far end of the room. According to court protocol, as I came to the entrance, I stopped and bowed to ask silently permission to enter. His Majesty nodded to indicate his permission. I proceeded to the middle of the room, it's quite a large room, and then stopped and again bowed to indicate, may I come farther. This again is court protocol, because if the emperor has observed something distasteful to him at that point, he can indicate a negative and one has to retire. He nodded and then he went beyond customary court protocol, because usually he will remain seated and nods his approval, but in this case, he arose, took a few steps and extended his hand, and then pointed me to a seat at his right. At his left, by the way, were two huge dogs who were lying there, semi-asleep at least. Dr. Evans came next, and he was seated by the dogs. The interview was held in Amharic and English. His Majesty speaks a perfect Oxford English, but by protocol he does not speak in any language to his visitors except the official Amharic. The Prime Minister sat between Dr. Evans and myself, and he interpreted for us into English and then back into Amharic for the emperor. You can be very sure that we did not speak unless we were addressed, and when we did so, it was right to the point. I shall never forget the reaction of His Majesty in my explanation as to our educational philosophy at Wheaton. He expressed his knowledge about the college and interest in it, and he made inquiry about it. And when I explained that our education is based upon the word of the living God, and then he heard the interpretation, and he smiled and extended both hands, and he said to us in Amharic, I wish the education of my people likewise to be based squarely upon the Word of God. Since then, I've heard His Majesty speak in this country and likewise at the Congress in Berlin last October. But I speak of primarily of another king. This is the house of the king. Chapel is designed to be a meeting on your part with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords himself. To that end, chapel is designed for the purpose of worship.